It's encouraging when God's people get it right. It doesn't happen very often, unfortunately. In fact, it's more common in biblical narratives to witness God's people make foolish choices rather than wise decisions. And sometimes it is the smallest nuance that separates the will of God from the will of man. We might even say that the biblical narrative continues today. Really, other than the reports are not being written in a book, the book. Can we say that there has been one continuous story since creation? Our story. It's easy to overlook, but the Bible does seem to support this idea. You are our epistle written in our hearts, known and read by all men. Clearly, you are an epistle of Christ. And might we even agree that we still get it wrong more times than not? Look around at how common it is for God's people to ruin their testimonies. It's so predictable that worldly onlookers have come to expect it from Christians, many using the apparent hypocrisy as fuel to stay far away from the church. What separates a good witness from the bad is often just one small thing: a jot, a tittle, a yod, an iota, a small stroke of the pen, one letter. It's easy to alter things, to change them in subtle ways that make them sound the same, but they're not. One small letter transforms the altar, A-L-T-A-R, into an altar, A-L-T-E-R. And for Christians, there is only one altar. We have an altar from which those who serve the tabernacle have no right to eat. Are you eating from that altar or another? It's not always easy to tell, but I can tell you it's easy. It's as easy as reading a letter and recognizing letters. You're an epistle of Christ, known and read by all men. And all it takes to alter your altar is to exchange one small vowel in one small word with one small stroke of a pen: a jot, a tittle, a yod, and a iota. Ask the right questions and it will be easy to tell if someone is worshiping their altar or their altar. There was a song popularized in 1969 about worshiping the altar of self. Its title, My Way. Its most famous letters screamed of self. I did it my way. It's what happens when you alter letters. Apparently, those who worship at the true altar sing a different song. His way. Its letters sing, what is his name and what is his son's name, if you know. Every word of God is pure. Do not change one letter, lest you be found worshiping at the wrong altar. Now for the reading of God's holy word. The children of Gad and half the tribe of Manasseh built an altar there by the Jordan, a great impressive altar. Therefore we said that it will be, when they say this to us or to our generations in time to come, that we may say, here is a replica of the altar of the Lord, which our fathers made, though not for burnt offerings, not for sacrifices, but as a witness between you and us. The children of Reuben and the children of Gad call the altar witness, for it is a witness between us that the Lord is God. That is Joshua chapter 10 and 22, verse 10, 28, and 34. Every word of God is pure. He is a shield to those who put their trust in him. Do not add to his words, lest he rebuke you, and you be found a liar. Proverbs chapter 30, verse 5 and 6. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Matthew chapter 5, verse 18. And there are also many other things that Jesus did, which if they were written one by one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. Amen. John chapter 21, verse 25. You are an epistle written in our hearts, known and read by all men. Clearly you are an epistle of Christ, ministered by us, written not with ink, but by the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of flesh, that is of the heart. 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 2 and 3. We have an altar from which those who serve the tabernacle have no right to eat. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 10. Join me in a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, have we been reminded in our worship today that you are our wonderful, merciful Savior, our precious Redeemer, and our friend. And indeed, who could have known that a lamb could rescue the souls of man? We're here, Lord, today to praise you, indeed to set aside the hurried pace of life, to set our minds straight on your word, on your will, and on your ways. We come here Friday evenings desiring to hear from you, and today is no different. So Lord, allow us to indeed hit the pause button on everything that is outside of this moment that does not bring us closer to you. We can't thank you with our words enough. We just ask here and now that you meet us where we're at. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. Welcome. If today is your very first time here, I see a few new faces. My name is Manny Fernandez. I get the less opportunity to be a co-pastor of this congregation with Dr. Jeff, and each and every week that he's teaching, I will be the one introducing him for the most part. We established this church already past 3 years ago, in 2019, October I think it was. And we've enjoyed ourselves through many different teachings. Now we're beyond what we talked about, going into the promised land. We left the Torah portions behind for a season of time, and we're going into the promised land now with Joshua. And reading in this introduction, and also in our worship set, hearing the word souls and what it is that Yeshua did for us, reminded me of a discussion that I had today with somebody, where I was challenged with something that is called soul sleep. How many of you guys know what that is? Okay, only 2 people. That's interesting. So this guy that has been working at my shop for roughly about 6 to 7 months, just on Monday came and told me that he bought a Bible. He wanted to know which Bible I read from, and I told him which translation I read from. And so he showed me the Bible that he bought. He actually was thinking about buying the NWT. And if you don't know what that is, I'll tell you later afterwards. I said, I'm glad you didn't buy that one. And so he said, yeah, let me show you the one I bought. And he showed it to me. He bought a King James version of the Bible. And so I pulled a little page retainer, whatever you want to call it, out. I said, here, I want you to do some homework. I want you to read the book of John. He goes, well, why that book? He goes, I started in the book of Genesis. Don't you start at the beginning of a book? I said, well, yeah, you can if you want to. But I said, it's going to take you a long ways to get to where I want you to get to. So read the book of John. Well, today he comes to me and he goes, do you believe that David is in heaven? I said, well, according to what I know about the Bible, I said, yeah, he's in heaven. He goes, no, he's not. I said, well, how do you know that? He goes, because I listened to a pastor, and he said that when you die, you don't go anywhere, that your soul just goes to sleep. You don't go to heaven. I said, can I give you my perspective on this? And he goes, no. He goes, I'm telling you what it says. I said, you've been reading the Bible for about 5 minutes, and you already know what it says. I said, this is a lifetime reading book. I said, I've been reading it for 20 years, and I'm still learning. Well, there was no telling this gentleman anything. I said, well, listen, since you don't want to listen to what I've got to say, I said, I'm going to send you something, and I want you to watch it and to read it, and look at every single verse that I'm going to send you, and then after that, I want you to come talk to me. At the end of the day, he comes to me, he goes, let's finish this conversation. I said, well, it's kind of late and I have to be somewhere. He goes, no, we got to talk. So I said, all right, go right ahead. He goes, I think you're wrong. I said, did you watch what I told you? He goes, no. I said, did you read the Bible verses? No. I said, well, you can't say that. I said, I want you to go home and I want you to take this weekend and look at those verses. And then next Monday, we're going to pick it up where we left it off. So I wanted to ask you this question as I was listening to the worship set. And I don't need you to raise your hands or anything, but how many of you had at least one spiritual encounter outside of people that you immediately know? Today I had 3 in total. Not that I needed to count them, but just because the way they happened. And the very last one of the end of the day, before this one with this guy that works with me, which I don't really count because he works for me, was a lady who was a customer of the business, but I hadn't talked to her until today, and somebody asked me to speak to her about something, and she saw my bracelet, and she goes, I like your bracelet. I said, oh, thank you very much. She says, do you worship Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? I said, yeah, absolutely. I said, do you? She goes, yes. She goes, I've been church shopping for about 2 years now. And I said, wow, I'm so sorry to hear that. She goes, yeah, I'm sorry too. She goes, I couldn't deal with the hypocrisy of the church. I think I just read that in the introduction. Did I not? When he told me to read this morning, I said, I know for a fact something's going to happen today that's going to nail it right perfectly on the spot. And if I wish sometimes I just had a camera somewhere to prove it to you guys. It's just crazy how this happens. I've said it before from this microphone, from this pulpit, that it's like I'm living inside of these teachings that we pass on from this pulpit all the time. So I don't want to take Dr. Jeff's time up here, so come on up.
Thanks, Manny. You know, I didn't send him that because I thought something was going to happen. I sent it because I wanted him to realize that he's got to read altar and altar and altar and altar and be able to make sure you guys know the difference between which altar he's talking about. And, you know, as we journey through, you know, can you believe we're almost finished the book of Joshua already? I can't even believe it. Next week we'll be done. And I think when we're done, we'll be able to say we've never had Joshua like this before in you know, the history of the church. I don't think, and I think we'll continue with some surprises today. Maybe the message title will make sense now with the introduction. It's called Pick a Vowel. Can you see it now? Pick a vowel. Obviously, the vowel is either the E in altar or the A in altar. And we're covering Joshua 20, 21, and 22, although I have to tell you the entire message is really drawn mostly from Joshua 22. The other chapters have to do with the priestly cities being inherited and the division and lands. Anyway, you can read it. It's valuable. It just didn't strike me this week that that's where we needed to stay. We'll cover three main categories and topics today. Number one, building your own great impressive altar. Talk about what that might mean. Number two, competing altars, or altering the altar. And number three, I think the real takeaway is what it means to be an epistle of Christ. And now these last few weeks for me have been really challenging as I'm pressing in and trying to figure out where's the real nuance, where's the deep meaning, where's the takeaway, where's the thing that's going to make a difference pastorally and prophetically in God's people. You know, it's so easy. I even think it's common today in the church for pastors to download messages. Like, they take them, they take them out of commentaries, they take them off the internet, they share them, and whatever that is. But I'm really desperate to hear what the Lord is saying, wrestling to figure out what is in this message, what's the takeaway. And so the first section we're going to call it the altar of treachery. And this spelling for altar, if you're following in the notes, is A-L-T-E-R. A-L-T-E-R in a sense, right? And here's where we are. You know, it starts off with this idea of what is this great impressive altar? How did we arrive here today? And we see, if we start back towards the end of chapter 21 in Joshua, we see, and we touched on this a few weeks ago in a message called The Promise Remains. We kind of fast forwarded and captured this verse because it was all about what it meant. Back then, we taught that message about what does it mean to actually settle the promised land. I really encourage you to watch that message and read the notes. If you're following in the notes online, you just got to hit that blue hyperlink. It brings you right to the message. But this message, this 21st chapter shows the completed work. It says, the Lord gave them rest because they had taken possession of everything God said they should take possession of. This is chapter 21, verses 43 to 45. And then this beautiful thing that I think we all want to capture is not a word failed of any good thing which the Lord had spoken to the house of Israel. All came to pass. You should just live in that. It doesn't matter how long it takes, by the way. Scholars believe it took 14 years to settle the land. It doesn't matter how bad it looks. All of God's promises come to pass. Always. 100% of the time. Right? And by the way, the only variable in that mix is you. Say, hey, it's me. I'm the variable. It's whether or not I'll accept it, or like, you know, how many times they had to be rebuked. Go take the land. Don't just go into it, but possess it. Right? So then we have to connect to a really cool theme that's been carried through from the Torah, And that is these 2.5 tribes, Gad and Reuben and half the tribe of Manasseh. Remember, way back, before they crossed into the promised land, they liked the land on the east side of the Jordan. They had lots of livestock. They saw this fertile land and they said, hey, we'd like to settle this land, technically on the wilderness side. And what's happening here is they are being released now because the land has been possessed to go back and live in the land that they had asked for, right? And you could see that in Joshua 22, verses 1 and 2. And the beautiful thing is, this is what they're being told. You kept the commandment that was made. In other words, the agreement that was made between Moses at the time and Yahweh and those tribes, they had fulfilled their agreement. You could read about that in Numbers chapter 32. They basically said, we like the land. And Moses was like, here's the problem. You can't stay on this side while your brothers, your other 9.5 tribes, have to go over and fight to take this territory. If you want this land, you have to send your men over with them. You can leave your women behind and your children, but you have to send your men over with them until you possess the land. And that's what's happened here. They've completed this agreement. And back then, by the way, the warning was, if you renege on the deal, you're going to die. It was a very serious agreement, right? So it basically says in Joshua 22, in verse 4, it's time to go home. You can go home now, right? Now, you should take note of this in Joshua 22, verses 5 and 6. We'll call it standing operating procedure. Every single time there is a completed work or a movement of God's people or a sending of God's people, there's always this kind of reminder that comes up. It's like, it's a guarantee. This is what it reads in Joshua 22. I'll just read it. Verses 5 and 6. But take careful heed to do the commandment and the law which Moses the servant of the Lord commanded you, to love the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, to keep his commands, to hold fast to him, to serve him with all your heart, with all your soul. And so Joshua blessed them and sent them on their way, and they went to their tents. I want you to hold that. We're going to come back and talk about that in detail in section 3 of tonight's message. But just know that's what happens. God says go, and the message always, by the way, you better remember to radically obey God. Important thing for all of us, everywhere God sends you, right? So they go on their way home, they go back, and then this amazing thing happens. Every once in a while, I don't know about you, but you read the narrative and you think, your initial impression is, this is really a bad idea, right? Like, this is bad. It's like in 2 Samuel 7 when David decides he wants to build the Lord a temple. And Nathan comes and says, God has a message for you. Has God ever told anyone to build a temple? And you're like, man, this is not going to go well at all. And it turns out well. It's not that God's like, yeah, you really got it. Well, it happens again here. It doesn't start off looking like that. What these 2.5 tribes do is, as they approach the Jordan on their way back, remember, picture this, they're going from west to east, right? They're on the west side of the Jordan. That's the promised land side. They want to settle land on the east side of the Jordan. On their way back, remember the city that's right before, that was there right when they crossed over, Jericho? Right in that area, they decide to build a big, giant, or what they call a great impressive altar. They stop and they build an altar. I want you to think about that. Is that a good idea? Was this a violation, an affront? How often do we go to inherit the promises of God and set up an altar? Our own great, impressive altar. Now, what happens following this in Joshua 22, starting in verse 11, is the 9.5 tribes, remember the half tribe, it's Manasseh's split on both sides, they're infuriated. They're so angry with their brothers when they find this out that they actually want to go to war. Praise God that they go to investigate first. So they send Phineas, you need to remember that name, son of Eleazar, he's the priest, and 10 rulers, one from each of the 10 tribes. So I'm saying 9.5 tribes, but they sent a ruler from Manasseh and one from the other 9 tribes, heads of the families, to investigate what's going on, to inspect. And we'll get to this a little later, but Phineas is a great choice. Phineas has a great track record with God, so he's a great man to send and discern what's going on. We'll talk about him in a little while. And they have this devastating accusation. This is what they say. Starting in verse 16, they say, "What treachery is it that you've committed against God? To turn away from God, from following the Lord. You have built for yourself an altar that you might rebel." This is a horrible, horrible accusation. Treachery means betrayal of trust, deceptive action or nature, disloyalty, unfaithfulness, infidelity, duplicity, treason. So they were left, hey, you did a great job. You fulfilled everything. You've been here for years. You did exactly what you promised. By the way, go take the land. By the way, don't break one commandment of the Lord. Remember to love him with all your heart. And the first thing they do is they set up an altar. Right? Doesn't that sound terrible? It sounds like a terrible idea, right? Now, if you wanted to have a flashback, like here's why they thought this, right? You can flash all the way back to Exodus chapter 27, verses 1 to 8. I won't read it, but I'll just tell you 11 times in that little passage, it says, you shall make, 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 and it gives intricate details of the altar. What altar? The altar that's in the tabernacle. The one that's on the east, the west side of the Jordan in the tabernacle. Details. It goes on at the end of that passage in Exodus 27 and verse 8. It says, make sure you make it exactly as it's shown you on the mountain. You can't just build it the way you want, right? So they know this, right? That's flashback number 1. Flashback number 2 in Deuteronomy 12, verses 1 to 14. I won't read it, but the concept is this. You're not allowed. First of all, it's like, hey, you have to be careful to observe all the statutes and judgments in the land which you're going to possess, right? So they possess the land, right? It's a prophecy initiative of what to do when you get into the land. Once you've had rest and possessed the land, here's the first thing you got to do. Obey every commandment of God, right? This is in Deuteronomy 12, 1 to 14. And it says, seek a place where the Lord wants to put his name. Don't think you could sacrifice and worship any place you want. You can't do it any place you want. When you cross over and you've given rest, build and offer offerings in the place that God chooses. So they have lots of reasons to be really upset with their brothers. Doesn't it make sense? This is what they know. They know you can't do this. You shouldn't do this, right? And then they give them some amazing warnings. And remember, they want to go to war. I thought of this, warnings. There's war in warnings, right? They wanted to go to war. This is the first warning. It's the warning of the iniquity of Peor. Do you remember what this is? This is what he says. This is starting in verse 17, chapter 22, Joshua. Is the iniquity of Peor not enough for us? What happened there, we'll talk about that in a moment, but what happened there, we haven't even recovered from yet. It's kind of a weird thing. It says, we're not even cleansed yet of what happened there. There was a plague. And by the way, God has a way of working. When the few make an error, everybody suffers. Like, you're going to make this error. When you make this error, we're going to pay the price for it. Right? So do you remember what the disaster at Peor was? It's the narrative of Balak and Balaam. You know, the whole donkey thing, right? In Numbers 22 to 24, where the people are convinced to commit harlotry, right? And how can you do this knowing what happened? Where the plague at the time killed 24,000 people. And Phineas, he's the guy that showed up on the scene and stopped the plague. By the way, the same guy they sent to investigate, he shows up with a javelin, goes into the tent of the Israelite man, and he sticks it right through the man and his harlot. And God says, that's the zeal I'm looking for, and the plague stops. So this is what they're remembering. They're petrified. Do you know what's going to happen? That you're transgressing? By the way, if you want to watch that, this is the favorite sermon title I've ever had in 3.5 years. It's called, What Did the Donkey Say to the Jackass? That hyperlink is there. That's the whole narrative about what took place, right? Anyway, but you know, the thing that's really weird about that little line is these 10 elders somehow still believe that they haven't been cleansed from that plague. I'll go ahead and say they're wrong about that. They're right about if you get it wrong with God, bad things happen not just to you, but those around you. That's true. But when God stopped that plague and forgave them when they repented, that was complete. It's very interesting. They do make an amazing offer to their brothers. This is the 9.5 tribes to the 2.5 tribes. And in verse 19, it says, hey, listen, if you have second thoughts about that land, like if it's unclean, you know, stay with us. You don't have to go there. You know, bring your families over. Just don't rebel against the Lord. You know, building yourselves an altar besides, instead of, or in addition to, the altar of the Lord. In other words, don't make us kill you. Like if you got to stay, we'll find a spot for you, right? And I love this. Great point. You should write this down. It's always better to investigate first before you come to final conclusions. They could have showed up with, you know, all sorts of, you know, like banshees, like ready to kill their brothers, and before they ask the right questions. Always good to investigate, right? Then they go on to another near and dear warning, the warning of Achan. Do you remember Achan? We talked about this extensively. This is just not that long ago. This is back in Joshua chapter 7, right? This is in the 20th verse of chapter 22. Did not Achan, the son of Zerah, commit a trespass in the accursed thing? Do you remember that story? Achan took stuff from Jericho he wasn't supposed to take. And all sorts of bad things were happening. And Joshua, you know, goes through that whole hissy fit. You know, it's a whole scene. But the point is that Achan committed this terrible thing. He took accursed things into the camp. And the takeaway was, do you remember that not just Achan died? The consequences were not just for him. His whole family and others, right? Everything he owned, all his animals, his possessions, it was terrible. They got all burned up, right? So that's our backstory. That's where we're sitting right now. We're in this place. You're all like, almost like, can you guys breathe, please? Take a breath. My gosh. You wouldn't have so much anxiety if you read the Bible passages ahead of time. There's a good outcome coming here. This is not going to end badly. I'm like, section 2, the altar of witness. This time, AR, altar of witness, the critical nature of altars. In the full version of the notes that are posted on our website, I think it's like 80-something pages this week, so you can really study through. All these passages are there, not just the address, but the Bible verses, right? I'm not going to read the Bible verses, but I want to give you a picture of the critical nature of altars, right? Even before the Moses thing, right? So I'm going to start with Moses, go backwards, and then end with Moses again. We're going to start in Exodus 20, verses 22 to 26. I'm going to call this the altar of his way, not my way, right? This is the whole passage about don't just build an altar the way you want, right? The whole passage. When we flash back to the flood with Noah in Genesis 8:20, it's like an altar of deliverance and covenant. After the ark settles and the flood is done, Noah builds an altar to sacrifice to Yahweh in the remembrance of what had taken place and how he was delivered, and of the new covenant coming with him. Abraham in Genesis 12:7 builds an altar of promise. God promised Abraham and his future descendants, even though he had no children, a new land. So he builds an altar. Abram, when he's Abram still, he builds an altar of, I'll call it an altar of separation. It's when he and his nephew Lot have grown to such a great people, they can't occupy the same territory anymore. They need to split and go take separate lands. And Abraham offers Lot, take your first choice, and I'll take the leftover. And that happens in Genesis 13 and 18. And Lot takes the better land, seemingly, or though he thinks. And then Abram thanks the Lord for what remains and builds him an altar to commemorate the separation. Of course, maybe Abraham's most famous altar is the altar of provision. That's in Genesis 22 when he is called to sacrifice his son Isaac. He's certain God will provide an alternative. He's certain about it. But he obediently builds the altar as if he's going to sacrifice his son. Of course, God stops him, and because of Abraham's faithfulness, he provides an alternative. So we'll call that the altar of provision. Isaac builds an altar of the name of God's name. In Genesis 26, I'll bless you and multiply your descendants. He says, have no fear, I'm with you. And he builds an altar and he calls on the name Yahweh. Jacob, after his safe reunion with Esau, builds an altar that's actually called God is the God of Israel. In Genesis 33 and 19 and 20, it's when he's relieved, when he's facing his brother for the first time after he duped him. And he's afraid his brother's going to take him out. And his brother embraces him. Jacob in Genesis 35, 1-3, builds an altar of purity. Right? He goes back, he returns to Bethel, which means the house of God. And he says, put away your foreign gods that are among you and purify yourself. Change your garments. Do not bring any foreign gods into this place. Burn your fake gods on this altar of purity. And we cycle back to Moses in Exodus 24. Maybe the most important altar at the time. He builds the marriage altar in Exodus 24. All the words which the Lord said, they said, we will do. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people, and all the people said, we will do it and be obedient. And Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, this is the blood of the covenant which the Lord has made with you according to all these words. That's the marriage altar. It's really the altar of betrothal. He says, be my bride, obey my commandments. And all the people said, we do. I want you to know that this betrothal and marriage thing is exactly what you're experiencing as a Christian. You all know, you even call yourself, oh, we're the bride of Christ. Technically, you are the betrothed of Christ, right? It says right here in John 14:3, I go and prepare a place for you. I will come again and receive you to myself, and where I am, there you will be also. That is betrothal language. The bridegroom goes off to prepare a place to receive his bride, and when the bride is ready, when the bride is ready for marriage, and the groom has prepared the proper abode, he comes and gets her. There's no consummation of the marriage in betrothal. There's no cohabitation in betrothal. And then the marriage happens. And where does that happen for Christians? It's in Revelation 19. Let us be glad and rejoice and give glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his wife has made herself ready. See? So we're experiencing that same thing. Okay, you see the importance of altars? Let's go back to Joshua 22, right? So thank goodness they didn't just come with swords and spears and violence, right? Because they accused their brothers of treachery and rebellion. And then in verse 21, they say, hey, we got an answer. And this is what they do in perfect submission in verse 22. The Lord knows. So let all of Israel know. If this is rebellion or treachery against the Lord, do not save us this day. Kill us now. If we're committing treason, treachery, or rebellion, we will willingly die. That's pretty cool. It says in verse 23, if we built ourselves an altar to turn from following the Lord, or to offer on it burnt offerings of grain offerings and other offerings, peace offerings, let the Lord himself require an account. We're willing to be accountable if we've made a grave error here. And 24 to 25, I just have to read it. It says, but in fact, we have done it for fear, for a reason. So now they're going to give the explanation, right? This is where you might be holding your breath. You better hope this is good enough. They said, we're willing to die right here and now. This is what they said. And I want to tell you, this is like we're reading a story, a biblical narrative, but it's got to mean something to you. Like, how does this apply to you? It's because you have these moments in your life. Like, are you really doing it for the Lord? You have them, right? We say we're doing everything for the Lord, but are you really doing it for the Lord, right? We're going to find out as we move what that means. We've done it for a reason. In time to come, your descendants, you 9.5 tribes on the west side, may speak to our descendants, saying, what have you to do with the Lord God of Israel? For the Lord has made a Jordan border between us. And you children of Reuben and children of Gad, you have no part in the Lord. So your descendants would make our descendants cease fearing the Lord. We built this altar because your descendants are probably going to say that the separation between us means we're not worshiping the same God. Continues in verse 26. He says, therefore we said, let us now prepare and build ourselves an altar. Here's the key. Not for burnt offerings, nor for sacrifice. Not to use for sacrifice. But that it may be a witness between you and us and our generations after us, that we may perform the service to the Lord before him with our burnt offerings. What does that mean? We're going to go before him, which means we'll cross over the Jordan, we'll go to the tabernacle, and we'll do it there. We'll go before him, where he put his name. With our sacrifices and with our peace offerings, that your descendants may not say to our descendants, in time to come, you have no part in the Lord. Can it be any more clear than this? In verse 28 it says, therefore we said that it will be, when they say this to us or to our generation in time to come, that you may say, here is a replica of the altar of the Lord which our fathers made, though not for burnt offerings nor sacrifices, but it is a witness between you and us. Far be it from us that we should rebel against the Lord and turn from following the Lord this day to build an altar for burnt offerings or grain offerings, besides the altar of the Lord, which is before the tabernacle. So, what do they do with this? Obviously, now this is where Phinehas comes in, because he's getting it right. He's got a good track record. He's the right person to send. He and with the 10 elders decide they've done nothing wrong. They go back and report this to Joshua. Report this in Joshua 22, 32 to 33. And of course, the people are totally relieved. So this controversy, where we don't often see, when we have these really radical moments, they often turn out so badly, right? So in verse 34 it says, and Reuben and Gad called the altar. Here's the name of this altar. They called the name of this altar Witness. For it is a witness between us that the Lord, that Yahweh is God. Amazing, right? So we saw the altar of his way, not my way, the altar of deliverance and covenant, the altar of promise, the altar of separation, the altar of provision, the altar of God's name, the altar of that God is the God of Israel, the altar of purity, the marriage altar, and now the replica altar called the altar of witness. All to lead us to this piece for us. See, this is what you're going to have to take away today. This is the question you're going to have to answer for yourself. Ask and answer. His altar or my altar? My altar, A-L-T-E-R, or his altar, A-L-T-A-R, right? These are the competing altars. This is what you're facing, right? You know what alter means? Alter, the verb. To change, to cause to change in character, composition, typically in a comparatively small but significant way. See, that's the key. This is what's happened. The church, little shift, little tiny yod, a little iota, a little letter, one small vowel. That's all it takes. I say altar or altar, altar or altar. It sounds the same. One is slightly different than the other, and it means to tailor for a better fit or to conform, oftentimes in clothing, but also used to conform something to one's belief. I'm going to change what God said a little bit because it fits better with my belief. That's the altar many people are worshiping on. Right? Of course, the noun, it's the table in a Christian church. It's this place of ritual sacrifice. It's the altar in the tabernacle, all these other altars we talked about. And then this piece that I want you to kind of hold in context. Really, we're not going to spend any real time. We've done a lot of Hebrews here from this pulpit, but I'll just say that Hebrews chapter 13, there's this verse 10, that says, we have an altar. So you know who this is talking about, right? From which someone else, we'll talk about that, have no right to eat. See, that's the key. Like, you have the right to eat from that altar. But the question is, are you eating from the altar? The subtle shift, the one change in a yod or an iota, a simple little vowel, right? So I want to go back. Remember I said I want you to hold on to that sending admonition every time this happens. Every time God wants to send you somewhere, right? He does the same thing. Every shift in position, every assignment that's complete, every time God's people are sent, every time God makes a promise to bless his people, he always says something like this. Let's go to Deuteronomy 6, 1-2. I want to tell you, though, it's very interesting. You should know that Deuteronomy is the second telling of the law. It's like a reiteration. It says, now this is the commandment, and these are the statutes and judgments which the Lord your God commanded to teach you, that you may observe them in the land, watch the reference, in the land which you are crossing over to possess, that you may fear the Lord your God, keep his statutes and his commandments, which I command you, and your son and your grandson, all the days of your life, that your days may be prolonged. There's the blessing, right? That's Deuteronomy 6, 1-2, right? We already read this. You see what's happening in Joshua? It's the same sending. But take careful heed to do the commandments of the law, which Moses, the servant, the Lord commanded, to love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to keep his commandments, hold fast to him, serve him with your whole heart, with your whole soul. And then Joshua blessed them. See, the blessing is, here's the blessing. If you do this, the Lord's going with you. If you do this, you'll have prolonged days, right? That's the thing. He's just reiterating this sending, this admonition, same thing every time God's people are sent or they move on to something else. Don't forget his commandments. But how do you love God? See, this is where it's going to get. You're going to have to kind of, if you could all just like strap on this like tight thinking cap, right? Strap it on, because we like to read the Bible like those are stories for someone else, right? Oh, that was those Jews, those Israelites in the wilderness, and they needed those commandments, right? How do you love God? He says, go, every time you go, keep his commandments, love the Lord with your whole heart. We see it happening in Deuteronomy and Joshua and John. By the way, that's the New Testament, right? If you love me, keep my commandments, John 14:15. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome, 1 John 5:3, right? Serve him with a whole heart. Is that just like an Old Testament verse? No, it's whatever you do, do heartily unto the Lord. Not as for men, right? Colossians 3:23, right? Now here's another section that all these verses are listed out in the notes, right? Not just the address. But here's the thing. You're going to be either convicted, angry, happy, I don't know. But there's like all over the place in the Old Testament, it says, don't follow the dictates of your own heart. Don't do that, right? Don't do it. Deuteronomy 29:18-19. Don't have peace when you follow the dictates of your own heart, as if a drunk person can be sober at the same time. See, that's what it's like. If you think you could follow your own heart and not obey God, you're like a drunk person who thinks he's sober, right? Jeremiah 9:12-14. Don't be a fool and wonder why the land is burning after you forsake God's laws and follow the dictates of your own heart. Like when it's all completely screwed up, don't be surprised, right? Jeremiah 16:10-12. Don't be surprised when the disasters come. Don't be ignorant of your sin. Don't chase idols. Don't follow the dictates of your own heart. Jeremiah 23:16-17. Don't speak your own vision like it's coming for God. Don't follow the dictates of your own heart as if nothing bad will happen. You have enough warnings? Amen. So this is where we have to go today. This is where we have to slide into this place as a church. Not a local congregation in Fort Lauderdale. As the church. Worshiping the Savior. Following his words. This whole thing, the title. Pick a vowel. You could see in this play, in the English language, people will say it's one of the most difficult languages in the world. Because we have a language filled with alter, all over the place. There. What? Right? For. I mean, it's a very difficult language. Alter. One vowel, right? Why are these letters so important? Well, let me give you a little setup in the Sermon on the Mount, right? Matthew chapter 5, 13-16. Let me give you some cha-chings. Ready? You are the salt of the earth. Don't lose your saltiness. You are the light of the world. Don't hide it. Hide your light under a basket. Let your light shine. You might want to know how to do that, right? Maybe the next verse tells you how to do that, right? Wouldn't you think that? Anybody want to know how to let your light shine? Let's go to verse 17. Do not think that I came to destroy the law of the prophets. I did not come to destroy them, but to fulfill. For surely I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of the pen, not a yod, not iota, not a vowel, will pass away until he's completed everything he's going to do. Altar, 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 altar. Whoever therefore breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches men to do so, translation, anybody who wants to set up his own altar, you'll be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does and teaches them, he should be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say to you, that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you will by no means enter. I want you to hold that, because the controversy over what righteousness is needs to be settled. Let me tell you what it isn't. Taking the A out and putting an E in and doing whatever you want on God's altar and or the altar and calling it God's altar, that ain't righteousness, right? When we get to Romans chapter 10, you're going to see this, what distinguishes righteousness. Now, let's talk about original letters, right? Let's talk about original letters. Wow, the light just went on. No, let's not turn that light on. It's the other one. So, original letters. Here's what it is. There will come a day. Let's just do this. There will come a day. There will come a day. Maybe it's today. Here's what it says. No. Halfway. That's beautiful. Here it is. Ready? Deuteronomy 30. You got to put your thinking cap on. We're going to go through some heady stuff. But the notes that are online will help you. Help you sort this out. Ready? Obey the voice of the Lord your God to keep his commandments and his statutes, which are written in the book of the law. And if you turn to the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul, you see the theme? For this commandment which I command you today is not too mysterious, not too difficult. Is the commandment difficult?
No.
No. By the way, do you know what commandments he's talking about? Deuteronomy is the second telling of the entire law. Not too difficult for you. It's not far off. It's not in heaven that you should say. Don't say this. Who will ascend into the heaven and bring it to us that we may hear and do it? Bring what to us? The law. It's not up there. Nor is it beyond the sea that you should say, who's going to go over the sea to bring it to us that we will hear and do it? What? The law of God. It's not over there. But the word is near you in your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it. See, I've set before you today life and good, death and evil, in that I command you today to love the Lord your God. How do you love the Lord?
All your heart, mind, soul.
How do you do it? You keep his commandments. To walk in his ways, keep his commandments, his statutes, his judgments, that you may live and multiply, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land which you go to possess. There'll come a day where you won't be thinking his laws are too mysterious or too far off. It's coming. A day's coming. They'll be in your heart to do them, right? And when you enter the promised land, there's a warning. Tell me if this doesn't sound familiar. Ready? Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, I'm the Lord your God. According to the doings of the land of Egypt, where you dwelt, you shall not do. And according to the doings of the land of Canaan, where you are going, or I'm bringing you, you shall not do. Do you see where we are you see where we are in Joshua? They're in that place. Don't do what the Canaanites do. You shall not do. Nor shall you walk in their ordinances. You shall, when you're there, observe my judgments and keep my ordinances to walk in them. I'm the Lord your God. You shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments. Here's the blessing. Ready? Which if a man does, he shall live by them. I'm the Lord. Leviticus 18, 1-5. You need to remember what we just said. When you go in the land, don't bring your Egyptian junk there. And don't adopt their junk. Follow my ways. With those ways, you will have life. Raise your hand if you think that's a good thing. Who wants life? Great. Say good thing, good thing, good thing, good thing. Got it. Okay. Those were the original letters. Now we have modern day letters. Paul. Paul likes to support the words of Christ, right? Let's say Paul's thinking not one smallest letter or least stroke of the pen should change. And he likes to support Moses' words. Why? Because Moses was writing about Jesus. Did you know that? Yeah, you know why he said that? Because in John 5, 46 and 47, Yeshua, Jesus, said, "For if you believe Moses, you'd believe me. For he wrote about me. But if you don't believe his writings, you won't believe my words." So you see what the problem is if you think you can dismiss the words of Moses, you're going to miss the words of Christ. You'll be the type of person that likes to change the yods and the tittles and the little vowels, the alters. You'll be that person, right? So, I want you to lock in your brain. We're going to read the first 8 verses of Romans chapter 10. Some of you may be thinking, why 8 verses? Shouldn't we read 9 verses? Why? You'll see. So here's Paul. "Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel that they may be saved. For I bear witness, they have a zeal for God. They're zealous. Not Phineas zealousness, not that good zealousness, but not according to knowledge. For they being ignorant of God's righteousness and seeking to establish their own righteousness." See, that's like we just saw in Matthew chapter 5. You better have more righteousness than those Pharisees and scribes. "Have not submitted to the righteousness of God." Ready? Ready for some cognitive dissonance? Your brain's going to go clink, clink. For Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone who believes. See how easy it is? Christ is the end of it. Just get rid of that law and you'll have Christ's righteousness. It's the end of it. Not one jot, not one tittle, all these blessings. Was it a good, raise your hand if you said it was a good thing. You want to get rid of the good thing? Anybody want to keep your hand up, you want to get rid of the good thing? No, nobody. So what does this even mean? For Moses writes, see, he's going to quote Moses. He knows he should quote Moses because Moses was writing about Jesus. Moses writes about the righteousness which is of the law. Oh, and there's that verse from Leviticus 18:5. "The man who does those things shall live by them." There it is. Was that a good thing? Did you guys agree that was a good thing? Yes. Moses writes about the righteousness of the law, which is a good thing or a bad thing? A good thing or a bad thing? It's a good thing. You will never hear in a Christian church anywhere that the righteousness of the law is a good thing. It's a bad thing because you want Jesus, you don't want the law. Yeah. That's what you're taught. Clearly because Christ is the end of the law. We just read it. End of the law, didn't we? Here's the next verse. "But the righteousness of faith speaks in this way." Now what we're about to read is something that should be very familiar to you because I just read it to you from Deuteronomy 30. Here it is. "Do not say in your heart, who will ascend into heaven?" Remember we just read that in Deuteronomy 30 about the law. You don't have to go over there. But then Paul just inserts this bizarre phrase. That is to bring Christ down from above. Ooh, Christ. I thought Deuteronomy was talking about the law. Yikes. "Or who should ascend into the abyss?" Like go over the sea, like in Deuteronomy, that will hear and do it. He inserts this bizarre phrase. That is to bring Christ up from the dead. Then it says, but what does it say? The word is near you in your mouth and your heart. In Deuteronomy it says to do it, right? Paul says, that's the word of faith we're preaching today. What? Okay, let's do step by step through this. You ready? God's righteousness versus self-righteousness. You know, they missed it because they were trying to do this under their own strength. Let's just agree, if you're trying to obey God under your own strength, it's never going to work. will stipulate that reality. You submit to God by being in Christ. The end of the law for righteousness. But we know it can't mean end like terminate, because Christ said not even a letter is going to be removed, so it can't mean terminate. It has to mean something else. Gee, it's amazing if you just click on it in some Greek, it just says goal. Christ is the goal of the law. Wow. That means it can't be done away with. He's just the law. You know, right? And by the way, if you look this up in 1 Peter 1:9, it says, receiving the end of your salvation, your faith, the salvation of your soul. You see, all you got to do is get rid of your faith and then you get saved. No, that makes no sense, right? The goal of your faith is that you get saved, right? And then Isaac and I were talking about this earlier, and he said, yeah, you know what? In James 5:11, it's the same word. Indeed, we count them blessed who endure, who have heard the perseverance of Job and seen the end of the Lord, that he is very compassionate and merciful. What, do you get rid of the Lord to get his compassion? No, the goal of the Lord is compassion and mercy, right? Doesn't that make sense? Then Moses writes about the righteousness of the faith. And he quotes this Leviticus 18, the righteousness of the law. He quotes that 18:5, the righteousness of the law. Now, let me tell you how this is interpreted in 40,000 denominations. The man who does these things lives by them. If you're going to try to keep God's commandments, you're going to be stuck living by them. When you make your bed, you're going to have sleep in it. That's a bad thing, right? But we already read that he's quoting this from a good thing. It's a good thing. And by the way, if you question where this is coming, well, maybe it's coming from somewhere else. Maybe it's a different quote of Moses. No, it's not. Because it's only quoted by Moses once in Leviticus 18:5. You'll find it nowhere else in the Bible, so it's definitely coming from Leviticus 18:5, which we know is a good thing. If you obey God's commandments, you will live. Right? So we know the righteousness of the law is a good thing, and then we have this most infamous word that separates these two phrases. Moses writes about the righteousness of the law, but Moses writes about the righteousness of faith. But Moses, he doesn't say but Moses. He just says, but the righteousness of faith speaks in this way. And he just happens to quote Moses again, because the whole thing is a quote from Moses. He goes from Leviticus 18 to Deuteronomy 30. He says, righteousness of the law, good thing, but the righteousness of the faith, good thing. Where'd the but come from? Well, it's funny that in Greek, but is the same word as and, therefore, moreover. It's all the same word. How do you insert a but versus an and? Just by context. If you're contrasting two things, you put but. Good, bad, good, but. Good, good, and. Then why does every English Bible have the word but in there? I won't say what just came to my mind. I'm not going to say that. But let's just change it. Cross it out in your Bible. The word is and. The righteousness of the law brings life, and that's good. And the righteousness of the faith speaks like this. Don't say you have to go up into heaven to bring the law down. You now have it in Christ. Or go into the depth of the sea that you're going to bring the law up because you have it in Christ. And what does that actually accomplish? That the law is near you in your mouth and in your heart. And Deuteronomy 30 says, to do it. Paul just says, that's the word of faith we're preaching today. What is he preaching? That the law is bad? Don't keep it? Don't do it? Or the law is good. But do you know what comes next and why I said we were going to stop at verse 8? Because what comes next is the sinner's prayer. It's the place you all start quoting chapter 10 of Romans. It's the most famous verse in chapter 10 of Romans. It's what every model sinner's prayer is modeled after in every evangelical movement in Christianity. Confess with your mouth and believe in your heart that Jesus is Lord and God raised him from the dead, and you can be saved. Call on the name of the Lord and you can be saved. They could just oddly leave out the word of faith that he's preaching leading up to it, which is when you have Christ, you have a changed heart. when you have a changed heart, God's laws are no longer too mysterious or too difficult. They're near you in your mouth and your heart to do them. Then why is the whole church changing letters? Getting rid of the yods and the tittles and all these things. Why are they doing that? When it's the exact opposite message of the Bible. Because they're making their own altars. They're altering altars. It struck me, like every week, I'm like, God, give me something new, something I've never seen before. And then these verses pop into my head. You'll never read this again the same way. Now let's go to the last verses of the book of John, right? You have to decide what altar you're eating from. I told you, you're going to be happy, or you're going to be really convicted, or you're going to be really angry when we're done. This is what John says. We know, we have this testimony. I wrote this, and there are also many other things that Jesus did, which if they were written one by one, I suppose that even the world could not even contain them. We just think, he just taught so many things. The whole world couldn't contain these books. But I think what he's really referring to is what Paul refers to in 2 Corinthians 3, 1-3. You're the books. Amen. You're the letters. Do we begin again to commend ourselves, or do we need, as some others, epistles of commendation to you, or letters of commendation from you? You are our epistle, written in our hearts, known and read by all men. You are the epistle, known and read by all men. Altar or altar? You are the epistle written in our hearts, known and read by all men. You are the epistle of Christ, ministered by us, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on the flesh that is in your heart. What heart? The one that when you went, confess with your mouth and believe in your heart that Jesus is Lord, you shifted to that prophecy in Deuteronomy 30 that said one day a people will emerge that they will not say God's commandments are too difficult, and yet you are taught year after year, decade after decade, for centuries, that the laws have nothing to do with Christians. You're past them, you're over them, you don't need them, you just need Jesus. And Paul said, no, Jesus is the law. You bring him down from heaven, you put him in your heart, and you radically obey God. You don't change letters. So when you go back to Hebrews 13, it says, we have an altar from which those who serve the tabernacle have no right to eat. See, I don't know what altar you're eating from. That's really what you have to decide today, right? And Pastor Manny and one of our favorite verses together is the living sacrifice verse in Romans chapter 12. To put yourself on the altar like a living sacrifice, all completely burned up for God, right? I'm not going to teach about that today, but that's really what you have to come to today. You have to make that decision of what food you're living on. As I won't do all the pieces, but if you go back to 1 Corinthians 9 and 13, where Paul is, the controversy is when somebody's working for the ministry, should they get paid? And he says, listen, don't you know that those who minister the holy things eat the things of the temple? See, that's what Hebrews 13 is talking about. There's people that are eating from the altar in the Old Testament, the priests. They're allowed to. That's their sustenance. That's their paycheck, so to speak. And they're not eating from this altar. Like, you need Christ to eat from this altar. He's saying, there are people, what the precedent is, you can get paid. Those who serve at the altar partake in the offerings of the altar. Even so, the Lord has commanded that those who preach the gospel should live from the gospel. See, but what is, okay, so let's say pastorally, that does mean you could get a paycheck for working in ministry. Let's skip that for the moment, right? Prophetically, you are the gospel. You are the epistle of Christ. being viewed by all men. You're being looked upon as the living epistle. And the whole world's looking. E or A? Altar, doing my own thing, one little letter. Oh, it's my version of Christianity. I could do that. Times have changed. Not one jot, not one tittle, not one iota, not one yod, not one stroke of a pen, not one letter. The precedent in Deuteronomy 18 is showing that the priest can eat. We won't go there. But really the whole thing, as you finish out in Deuteronomy and in Hebrews chapter 13, it talks about the wrong altars, carried away by strange doctrines and the foods that don't really profit you, right? And it really connects kind of back to this accountability. Those that are ministering, leading you, teaching you, maybe this is just from me to you, is make it easy on, it says make it easy on them. Like, don't be such a pain. Don't be so rebellious. Don't try to eat from the wrong altar. Trust them. They're doing it for you. Like, you could hate this message. You could feel like, I don't want this equipment. I don't want this level. This is hard. This is a level of understanding my faith. It's hard. I just want to go back to G-rated entertainment, sing a few songs, wear Christian badge on my sleeve, recite a few Bible verses, change whatever letters I want. It still looks a little Christian. So be it. Let me read to you again Proverbs 30 as we near the end. We're very close to the end. Who has ascended into heaven or descended? And who has gathered the wind in his fists? And who bound the waters in his garment? And who has established the ends of the earth? What is his name and what is his son's name, if you know? See, make a decision. Are you worshiping the true God today? Are you? Or are you changing letters? It says, every word of God is pure, his shield to those who put their trust in him. Do not add to his words, lest he rebuke you and you be found a liar. We'll just say, don't change letters. Every word of God is pure. Do not change one letter, lest you be found worshiping at the wrong altar. I want you to think again of John 21. Many other things that Jesus did could have been written one by one. I supposed all the books of the earth could not contain the things that would be written. That's you. You are the epistle of Christ. Every word of God is pure. Do not change one letter, lest you be found worshiping at the wrong altar. Do you see it now in Matthew chapter 5? For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not one small letter, not one least stroke of the pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. That's what you're being sent out to do. You're the epistle of Christ. People are watching. You change letters, you're worshiping a different God. What does it mean to build a great impressive altar? Competing altars. And what does it mean to be an epistle of Christ? That's what we covered today. Father, we come before you. We thank you. I never know how heavy it's going to get. It's always seems a little bit more serious than I intended. But you be glorified with your word. Every word is true. As we know, your word will not return void. Just bless you in the mighty name of Yeshua. See you guys next week.